Welcome to our webinar. It's wonderful to be with you all again. Uh, those out in cyberspace and the few in the room tonight, we've had some local people either are traveling or sick, so some of our regulars aren't here this evening in the room with me. But it's wonderful to join you out there in cyberspace. Uh, tonight we're talking about the people in our lives. And of course, when we say that, each of us thinks of different kinds of folks, friends, family, um, people we work with, if we're have a job or if we're engaging any other kind of activities out in the world. Give me 1 second. My throat. What do they call that? A frog in the throat? And feels like a frog in the throat. A croak. I'm not croaking. Oh, this is going to be a good evening. The many and varied people in our lives create our community. They're the people that we are associating with, plus the people even more distantly that we hear about, public figures, entertainers, and so on. All those folks that are out there that influence us by what we learn about what's going on with them and what they're doing. Perhaps if they're politicians or something, might be influencing us, and we may have some very strong feelings about that. Hopefully not too strong. A wide network, and everybody's familiar with that, but the consequences of that are usually not particularly evident to us in our daily lives. So sometimes we'll say, well, I'm really frustrated with this person, or that person just has made me so happy. They've been doing something for me, and I'm just thrilled for what they've done. So we have sometimes some pretty good feelings about things that are going on in our network. But much of the time, we're not really all that aware of it. And there's another level to all of this, of course, when you get into the work that I do, the energy work, is that you begin to see that all of these are like points in space, different spots that are interconnected and interacting in the field that is our environment, that is our life. And so when you're dealing with this on an energetic level, it's a great dynamic. It's a great meshwork of energy points that are interacting and creating the flow of your life on the level of your finest feeling and the level of your being. And so when you look at it from the perspective of energy, it's a very delightful thing. It's just absolutely marvelous, because we can see that influences are there. People come in, that they bring a certain vibe, they bring a certain energy. We run into somebody, we might not even know them, and you can see by their gait and their smile on their face and the way they're animated that they're happy and they're enthusiastic. And you take in that energy both through the senses, but also on the subtle level. There's that presence. Oh, there's this joy in my environment. There's this wonderful vibration. Or if you meet other folks, maybe if somebody struggling to get down the street. I remember an encounter I had it was a few years ago now. There was a lady. I don't think she's around now. She's probably in residential care, but she was blind, and she would get around downtown. She lived in an apartment, and she could navigate the downtown and go eat in restaurants and take care of her life business. And she knew the whole downtown, even though she couldn't see it. She knew where everything was. And I had this experience with her. I was helping her cross the street, and it was just to make life easier for her. And I was walking along, and she said, "Now there's a chair over here, and I want to rest there for a while, and you can just leave me there." And I thought, "Oh, well, thank you, for, like, not making me wait for you. You were going to just make yourself comfortable." And so she walked along, and she's tapping with her stick, and she found the chair, and made her way and sat down in it just fine. And I was so struck by the quality of the person. Just, obviously being blind is not an easy thing. And Fairfield does not have much in the way of things that you might say would make a blind person's life easy. It doesn't have things that are difficult, really, but it's not easy. You have to listen for traffic because there's nothing to signal you when the lights turn green, and if there's any kind of obstruction on the sidewalk, maybe a car sticking out of an alley or something like that. There's no way to know that. You just have to use your stick and find your way. So I felt really good about helping this person, and they felt good about receiving that. And then we just chatted a little bit about things, and then she sat down, and I left her there. And I saw her many times downtown. It was really part of my world, you might say, that the quality of life with this person was, that she was gracious and polite and pleasant to be with and very positive. And, the last time I saw her, actually getting around wasn't very easy. She's quite old, and the joints weren't working like they used to and such, but she still was very, very positive. And she needed to rest, but she knew where the chair was. And then after she rested, she would move on to wherever it was she was going. But I use that as an example. On the surface level, yes, there are these wonderful qualities of the person, but the energy around her was part of the whole experience. It was that energy of belonging, of being in a community, being in a space, being connected to those who were nearby. We just discovered the clock didn't stop when I stopped it. It somehow regenerated itself. It's got, its internal energies, and, it's a very powerful thing. Wonderful clock. I've had that since I was in medical school. Anyway, we've got the clock under control now, so we can continue. It only gets really important, of course, when we get to the group clearing session and there's a lot of silence, and then you hear the ticking in the background. And of course, I've lived with that clock for decades, and I don't hear it. It can be ticking away there, and I pay no attention. It can chime, and I won't even know that it chimed. I'm aware of it on some subtle level, but not really conscious of it, unless I need to be. But it bothers people who don't live here. So we quiet the clock. The thing about working on the energy level with the network of people that we know is that, as I was starting to describe, it's a whole bunch of points of interconnected energy. So they're all interacting. There's this flow, there's this dynamism that constitutes our subtle environment. And of course, our subtle environment extends, to the world, to the state, the world, and to the universe. So there are many, many layers, you might say, or interconnected levels of energy that are influencing our life at any given moment, that make our day go smoothly or make our day more difficult, shall we say. We might trip us up a little bit here or there. And the same is true then of the people in our lives. And of course, that does include our family, but in this discussion, I really want to think of us much more broadly. Yes, there are things going on with the people who are close to us, but perhaps physically far away, living in other cities and other states. And what goes on in their lives has possibly some influence on our life, just depending on the degree to which we have a bond with them. And again, that bond is an energetic connection, which we can touch, we can work with to make sure that it's communicating the best possible exchange of good feeling on a subtle level feelings. So we can work on those levels. When we work at the network, there may be those particular points, that is to say, people and maybe things, institutions that we're dealing with, that may be stimulating us in a positive or a not so happy way. But all of those things influencing us, we can work with those if we tune into them. And it's just a matter, as we'll see when we get to the group clearing session, just a matter of settling in and sensing what am I feeling that is not, so to speak, my own. Now, that phrase doesn't actually have a real meaning because, of course, everything that we're experiencing is my own. But what I mean is, What is it that is particular to my life, and what is it that is coming to me from my network, my whole human and environmental network that's influencing how I'm feeling at this moment? And that's an important distinction, particularly uh, particularly when you don't feel you're having a good day. To check in, what is it that's out there, and how then you can just ask that question: how might that be different? How could I experience that differently? And just settle into that, so you feel that subtle feeling of some pull, some discomfort in some way, some fear, or some anger, or whatever the feeling might be. Just feeling that pull in, that's influencing you. Some pull, I say pull, but it's some sense of something going on that's disturbing, and just tuning into that and sensing, oh yeah, yeah, there's something there. You may not know where it's coming from. That really doesn't matter. The only thing that really matters is what's the quality of that, and then could that be could that be a happier situation, and just letting that be. And so, we can even do this even before we get to the group clearing session. Just take a moment right now, just for fun. And I just want you to experience whatever it is that you're experiencing, and ask the question, is it mine, or is it coming to me from my collective existence, my network? I'm going to close my eyes while we do this too, so I can just tune in. And I'm struck immediately with the mixture of energies that I'm experiencing. Some people in my network right now are very happy. Some are um, feeling pressure, a lot on their mind, and lots of responsibilities, things they need to do. And then there's also some others that are not happy right now. So what I'm going to do then, having identified that, is just go back in and just let those energies just settle. We've got we've got nice positive energies. We've got energies more unhappy, some just frantic. And we're just going to let that find some peace like that. And what I'm sensing is a sense that it's not moving now. It's just still and very peaceful, and there's no disturbance. And two things, of course. One is we've just done something for others, and the other is we've found a place within ourselves, our self-referral state, that is the basis of our activity. So now we can do what we need to do and just do it with ease, because now we've brought some peace to the collective influence on our existence. I'm just savoring that. Just enjoying that peaceful state. Let's check back in just to see if maybe there's anything else that right at the moment that's feeling that it needs attention. We're going to do this in more detail in the group clearing session, but I wanted to bring that in right here so you had a clear feeling. Hopefully you're having a clear feeling of what that feels like. So a while back, I was doing my webinars based on movies that I was watching, and each webinar was based on a particular movie, which gave me an idea, something to talk about. And the program, it was actually a television program um, called The Fosters, got my attention recently, and it was 5 seasons, so it held my attention for kind of a long time. Did a good job of holding my attention to it, and I was quite fascinated by it because it really presented just about every kind of relationship you could imagine. The name Foster was a bit of a play. There was a couple, actually a lesbian couple, and one of them was named, last name was Foster. And I think the other one was named Adams, if I remember. And so they named the show The Fosters. It's, it's like, well, that was the family name, but it's also the fact that they were parents, they took in foster children. And amongst them, they found a set of twins that they adopted, and the twins were Hispanic. And then they later adopted a brother and sister. Sister was, I think, 16 when she joined the group and moved into the house. And the brother came a little bit later, and he was, I think, 12 at the time. I think he's 4 years younger. So they went through all kinds of stuff. Okay, it was a television show. There had to be drama every week, several subplots, because it's kind of an ensemble cast. Each of them has their own story, their own interactions, their own network. But then the family of 6 now was quite a network. Plus, eventually, all the living natural parents of the foster kids, which had become adopted eventually, all of them were also involved. So you had these relationships that were that embodied a lot of energy, if you will, because they were not just the natural family. They were, you might say, a manufactured and very extended family. And so then there were some remarriages and things like that had taken place. So this was this hugely complicated network, and then all of them had friends and people that they were interacting with, and the kids were at school and they had their interactions there, and the parents each had a job. one of the women was a police officer, and her ex was also a police officer, and then the other one was a vice principal of a school. It was I think we'd call it a charter school, that it was on the beach, actually, and so they took a lot of advantage of the fact of their location, and it was a wonderful setting, and they had a really interesting environment there. And then they all had their interactions. So there were the work environments and the school social environments and the academic environments, and then all the interactions through the relationships with the natural parents, and then their remarriages and relationships and such. And then some other foster kids got involved in the story, and there was a girls' home that was established, and it just went on and on and on. And then all these things happened. One of the principals of the story, her name was Callie. She was one of the last adopted. She was 16, and she fell in love with her adopting brother. So that proved to be an interesting challenge for them through the story. And there was this elaborate playing out over 5 seasons of how their relationship evolved, and they truly were best friends. It was a really beautiful relationship. But they took seriously, and the parents insisted on it, the fact that they were, even though they were not blood brother and sister, that they were living together as brother and sister, and therefore a romantic relationship was not available to them. So that didn't happen. But Callie was a kind-hearted person and very bold, and she she got herself into repeat many situations just over and over again, um, saving people from, some of them were foster kids in difficult situations and things like that. And so she made a lot of, you might say, poor decisions for the right reasons, and got herself into some very serious, very challenging situations. Nearly got herself killed a couple of times, once by being involved with a drug dealer. She was trying to save another girl, and so she helped out the girl by taking her place with this drug dealer and nearly got herself killed. And in another situation, she went to rescue her brother, who was still living at that time. This was early on, still living with a foster family, foster father. I'm not sure if there was a mother involved. At least there was no woman in the scene. And they were basically going to kidnap her brother from the foster home. I mean, a ridiculous thing to do. Only a kid would imagine, I think, trying to do this, but they were going to rescue him. They weren't really kidnapping him. They were, in their minds, they were rescuing him. And the stepfather came in and pulled out a gun and threatened her. And fortunately, the police officer mother came in at that point in uniform and pulled out her gun and ordered subdued the guy. And so, it was very dramatic. So this was the kind of stuff that was going on. So the story, of course, is a fascinating story and very engrossing. But the reason I brought it up is because of the energy network that existed that I've been trying to describe in terms of just who these characters were and the kinds of things that they were going through. The energy that they were involved with was, on the one hand, extremely nurturing and supporting. It was a wonderful bond that they had on the energetic level. And then there were all these points of disturbance that were going on that they had to work with. And, you could see that at times they were overwhelmed on all levels by the influences that were perhaps not so, shall we say, savory, and had to somehow find a way of navigating that. And of course, they didn't have resource to the energy, but it draws our attention. If we think of those of this family as a kind of example, if we think, wow, all the people in my life and the kinds of relationships that I have. And those of us that live here in Fairfield, Iowa, we tend to feel that the environment here is really a pretty soft and supportive environment. Everybody's pretty nice. In fact, the Fairfield is kind of the embodiment of Iowa nice, which is a little like Canadian nice. It's the people are really, really lovely, courteous most of the time, and gracious. Crime is, particularly in rural Iowa, is there is some, but not a lot. And, you generally feel very, very safe. And people don't lock their doors often unless they're, like downtown. It's just, there's just a quality of being around here. I often tell the joke, and I probably have said it before, even on the webinar, that the largest cause of traffic jams in Fairfield are when two drivers come to an intersection like this at right angles, and both drivers are motioning to the other that they should go. And according to the social rules here, it is rude if you go first. You always defer to the other person. And this is true of all the people in town. It's so universal. It's amazing. And so it's a big cause of, traffic jams. We just can't hardly um, get through the intersection. We just, you're like stuck because, it's like, no, you go, no, you go, no, you go. You can wait there for several moments until finally somebody, decide, oh, okay, I'll go, acquiesce to the situation. So anyway, so the network is a very special and very, very wonderful thing. And when we work at that level, which we're going to undertake here in just a few minutes, we have an opportunity to bring harmony, not just to ourselves and those that we're really close to, as we discussed last month, but really to bring harmony to our whole environment, our community, our state, the country, and the world, and even to some degree the universe. And so it's a very special level to work on, the energy level. because of its enormous impact. So now normally I don't put the group clearing session on the recording, but I'm going to go ahead and do that this time, partly because I've already introduced how we're going to do it, and because I really would like others to be able to see the very special effect that can be created when we do this, which is going to be for us individually, of course, those of us who are participating, but also for the much larger community that we interact with. So I'm going to invite everyone to sit comfortably and close the eyes if you're not already doing so. And closing the eyes is just so that you can settle within. It's often helpful to take a couple of slow, deep breaths. And now, now I'll invite you to see who shows up. And it may be specific individuals or just sort of feeling states, just subtle sense of things joyful, things serene, things uncomfortable, things unhappy, things in distress, whatever shows up. And it can be many different things. Don't necessarily just grab one and run with it. Just be very open right now to receiving everything that's out there. You know the joke about not thinking an elephant? Don't think of an elephant. If you're a Democrat, don't think of Republicans. If you're a Republican, don't think of Democrats. Ah, there you go. You may notice that it's hard to discern any specific thing, but perhaps you get a sense that there is just some sense of movement or pressure or tension. By analogy, imagine yourself in Fairfield. We have an abundance of turkey vultures, masters of flight. And if you watch them, you can see how the air currents buffet them, and they rock a little bit as they're gliding. They almost never flap their wings. And they just ride the currents. And it looks, if you just glance, it looks like it's very smooth. But if you look really closely, particularly if the wind is blowing just a little bit, you can see how they're actually kind of buffeted as they ride along. And then they adjust, and then they adjust. And so you may have the sensation that although you feel basically, I'll just say tranquil, that actually there's flow in the field around you and through you. It's not actually still. There's different puffs of energy, if you will, like puffs of air. And some of them are feeling good, and some of them maybe not so good. See if you get a little bit of a sense of that. And you might just let your attention now go to someone, perhaps more than one, people who are happy, confident, fulfilled, delighted, just people you know who are cruising along right now. And you may get some sense of them being laid out in space. And perhaps even noticing just on that subtle level that there's some sense of interconnection with you, perhaps some of them with each other. And now that we have those very positive points in our field, let's just do a little scan and see if we can find points that perhaps are having some difficulty, people in our lives that are having some difficulty, some roughness, some challenges, health, finances, social, spiritual. Now, I phrase that in a way to try to encourage that we're just observing, which means our own personal feelings about any of it are in the background right now. Our attention is on what's going on with others. And again, you may see them distributed in space around you. And you may be able to get some subtle sense of connectedness between you and them, and some of them with each other. Now, if you can think of your network of those who are happy and successful and joyful, and mix that with the network of those who are not quite so much that way. We get a very complicated network. So again, let's just see now that we have a complicated network in front of us and around us. I shouldn't say in front of us because it's really all around. Let's just see if, with a little intention that everyone should enjoy peace in their life, an inner peace, a quiet, stable center, a deep connection to who they are and where they are, and to the earth and the sky, waters around. You may notice that just having your attention with a little bit of intention for harmony and peace, things begin to shift. You can feel that things get smoother, more integrated. You may feel a sensation that there's like less strain in the field. The field just feels more harmonious. And now we can extend this exercise beyond those of immediate involvement in our life. You might think of those right now who are facing challenges that you don't know, but who you know of. Farmers in the western part of Iowa that have lost their homes to flooding, also in Nebraska. I think it's actually been harder in Nebraska, or that has been more damage in Nebraska. And you can think of people, if you wish, in France and particularly in Paris, but people all over the world who watched the Cathedral of Notre Dame burn yesterday. 800-year-old, gorgeous, what do they call it, French Gothic? Incredible place. And then people in Central and South America who find their environment so not life-supporting that they will risk their lives, the lives of their families, to travel, try to get to the United States in the hope that they might find opportunity here. People in the Sudan, people in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, and other countries. People in the, I guess they call it the Indian subcontinent, the broader area there, Bangladesh and Pakistan and India itself, Myanmar, people in Indonesia. All over the world, there's people who are greatly, greatly challenged. And so, in our vastly expanded awareness, our huge network, just having that subtle notion. Subtle means we're not really focused on it, but just the notion, gentle thought. It could be better for them. So I'll give you a minute or two to come back in the room. So I hope this has given a little experience of how your relationship, I should say relationships, with those very close to your life and those who you only know about, your relationship has shifted a little. And there's a deeper sense of peace and a clarity of connection. It's very profound. You may not have solved the problems of those in Sudan or Central America or South America, Argentina or Brazil or wherever, or the Middle East or all those other places. And they certainly may not notice anything in particular. They might, but some little change has taken place. Your relationship with that has changed. And so your influence is ever more powerful. And so when you do your group meditation program, you know, we don't go in with an attitude or an intention really, but we just know that when we transcend in a group, we produce an influence that radiates out, that changes, produces harmony. And so what you've seen is, if you've had a little experience with this, and I'll check in with you here in a moment, is that this is how it works. That you might say this is how collective consciousness works. These are the mechanics of transformation, mechanics of interconnection. And so when we collectively have these ideas, that there should be peace in people's lives, harmony, safety, and abundance, it's a very real effect. We produce a very real effect. So if you're on your computers out there in cyberspace and want to say something about your experience, you can use the chat function, or you can, let me see if I can unmute you. Yeah, do that. Yeah, so you people out in cyberspace can talk. And looks like Steve is up here. Steve, you got something you want to throw in? I'm not hearing you. You may not have a microphone. Oops. What is this? Let me see if I can unmute. What's that? It didn't work. Oh, you're muted. Yeah, there it is. Unmute. There. Yeah, Steve, I think you have yourself muted. I'm not sure that I'm the one that's muted you because I can't unmute you. Don, do you have something you want to contribute?
Oh, no, it was a very nice experience. Seemed very profound. I have no specific things, that come to mind.
Well, very good. It's good to hear your voice anyway and to know that you're out there. Thank you. He just said nothing specific came to mind. He just had a very enjoyable experience. Steve, it looks like you got yourself unmuted. Do you have anything you want to add? He's asleep. No, I can't tell that. He didn't say anything. Okay. Anybody here in the room?
I really enjoyed it. And as you were extending it to people that I didn't know, I could feel them second too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so pleasant. I just
He said it was so pleasant he didn't want to leave, and that he could feel the settling in those, even those who were very remote that he didn't know but just knew of. Somebody, I'm going to just click the chat thing here. Steve, you want to type a message? I got your message here. But just that feeling, yeah, that on that subtle level, that something is shifting out there. So that's how it works, you know. And as I said, when we do our group program, we don't have a conscious attention to that, but we create that influence that affects everybody in that very subtle level.
But also sense how you do it, which is the same level.
Mm-hmm. Right. He said he could sense how I do my healing because it's on that same level. And I mean, I just, day after day, I have examples of just going to that level and just allowing that energy to shift. It just becomes more harmonious. And then people's anxiety goes away. They sleep better. Their digestion improves, and, you know, and everything else over, you know, a few days. He typed out all okay. Thank you. Good. I'm glad you could join us too. Okay, anyone else out there? All right. Well, good. Then we'll bring this webinar to a conclusion, and we'll be back next month. I will have to come up with a topic for next month because I didn't come up with one today or in the last days to have on hand for tonight. Everyone who has participated in this webinar is eligible for a $25 discount on a 3-session program. So if you sign up by the end of the month, I will try to put that in a letter to you sometime in the next few days. It's a very busy week for me, so if I don't get the letter out till next week, please forgive me. Okay, it's been wonderful being with you all this evening, and you all take care. So, bye now.